Digital disruption is definitely here. It will impact you. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Curious Monday. It's your weekly dose of inspiration, brought to you by our good friends at Hyper Island. So today I'm going to talk about navigating digital transformation. Last year and a half, I've been over at NUS talking to literally hundreds of people about digital transformation. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Let me talk about some of the top 10 issues we're seeing in digital transformation right now. And don't worry, I'm going to get to what a definition of digital transformation is. So during the COVID pandemic, what we've seen is an acceleration of digital transformation. 10 years has been compressed into 2020 and 2021. We've all forced to work from home or look at hybrid working, and that's point two. We've looked at what kind of technology we can use there. Are we simply happy to use Zoom? But again, a whole bunch of issues has come up about employee well-being, mental health, productivity, relationships with co-workers and bosses. The current slew of HR technology is not really handling. And we know we've gone through the great resignation. Now we're going through the other side of that, and people are struggling to actually hold on to jobs with the inflation and tech realignment. We're also in point three there. There's been a consolidation of tech vendors. Well, I strongly believe that startups and small businesses do drive innovation. The big companies tend to monopolize markets. So it tends to be that if you're looking for a digital transformational solution, you're going to get it from a Oracle, SAP, Salesforce, IBM, etc. But out of those, they've all got specific agendas. And frankly, who do you trust? Do you trust Microsoft? Probably not. Do you trust the Googles and Facebooks of the world? Definitely not. But again, there's a consolidation of those vendors. Even in the marketing space, if you're probably spending the majority of your money in digital marketing, and that money is going to two vendors, which is going to be Google and Facebook. AI and hyper automation is happening. We've all heard this. Are robots and AI going to replace my job? Short answer is yes. The question is when, not, and also the question is how. But with the proliferation of machine learning and AI becoming a real thing, everything is actually getting hyper automated, particularly manual or repetitive jobs. We've seen digital customer experience actually become a big thing. We know that when we look at applications, web experiences, and so on, it's very easy to figure out which ones stand out and are great experiences, and versus those that are pretty terrible, that require to sit on a kind of call center IVR for about 20 or 30 minutes. Those that allow you to do online self-service and of course do that well are the ones that are standing out. We also know that the world is becoming a data-driven one. If you don't have data and analytics as part of your job, that will change. You must be a data expert. Data scientists are the hot and sexy jobs of the 21st century. And again, if you're thinking about a specialization, I suggest that's it, because that's where the money's at. When we talk about the future, we've got to think about the immersive internet. Now, this is Web 4.0. What is the metaverse is not real at the moment, but what is real is Web 3 and the idea of blockchain. Web 3 and Web 4 are splintering off. The idea of the Matrix or Ready Player One or Sword Art Online as a metaverse, which is fully interactive, touch, taste, smell, and other senses is coming, but probably not until we have the right kind of mix of procedurally generated content via AI and of course quantum computing to fuel that. But in the meantime, we're stuck with Web 3. Web 3 is actually fantastic if you can figure out a use case for it. Most of that's through decentralization or blockchain, but there's also a lot of speculation. Things like Web 3 protocols leading to things like NFTs. Are they useful? Well, certainly people have made money in that space, but the use cases are still being developed. Of course, cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin, Ethereum, and so on have made people billionaires, but also, of course, a lot of people angst, which nicely leads into point number 9, which is digital misinformation, which happens a lot in the crypto space. Fake news, the rallying cry of Donald Trump, but also what we've seen across the last few years of digital platforms. If you're not aware of this, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, etc., pay out roughly $2 to $4 per 1,000 views. No, sorry, it's $20 to $40 per 1 million views. Now, if you're a content creator looking to make money from YouTube or another video platform, or Facebook, for example, getting a revenue share of advertising means that you must become a sensationalist. People respond to outrage, they respond to emotional manipulation. So if you're out there trying to get 20 million views of your video and make a decent amount of money from it, well, you're probably going to fall into the category of fake news and digital misinformation. Or you've come up with something extremely compelling, which is pretty rare. And the last point was really, why you want to go to Hyper Island or why you might want to go to a place like NUS. We're all being left behind. It's been forecast by 2025, we're all going to require at least 7 new skills to keep up. That's anything from those other 9 points I've talked about, understanding social media and what's real information, understanding Web3, being a data scientist and analyst, looking at customer experience, looking at RPA, hyperautomation, etc. Even just the soft skills, communications, resilience, adaptability, all those things you need to do to kind of keep up to date. There's a lot of things happening. How does that link back to digital transformation? Well, let me start off with some terminology. When we think about digital transformation, we often think about launching an app or doing an e-commerce site and so on. But that usually falls into one of the first two categories. Most businesses and organizations are doing what's called digitization. That's where you're actually taking a piece of paper, turning it into an Excel spreadsheet, and becoming data ready. But from a business point of view, this adds very little value. This means you're making no real money, you're not saving much money, the same process still exists, but you've turned your piece of paper into an Excel spreadsheet. Most organizations try to go through a process of digitalization, where you've fully embraced the digital world, but what the outcome will be maybe a 30% improvement in revenue, maybe a similar 50% reduction of costs. Those are significant in big companies. However, digitalization tends to be about launching an app or doing something that affects one team, but it's not truly transforming a business. It's what I call incremental innovation. Of course, on the bigger side of things, we have digital transformation, and this is extremely hard to do. This is the concept of creation, where you're truly going to change the world. Think about guys like Netflix and what they did. Their digital transformation was not going away from sending a DVD via post into streaming. That was a big part of it. Their true digital transformation, what put them into a blue ocean, was the original content they produced. They made their competition irrelevant by streaming and also streaming original content that you otherwise couldn't get. And back in the day, Blockbuster, in their deepest, darkest fantasies, would have never thought about actually creating original content. And that has a massive impact. That turns a company that's struggling as a startup or a scale-up into the world leader in streaming. For closer to home, think about organizations that have actually completely turned into a platform, have completely transformed themselves inside and out, and wreck their existing business model, but on the other side of it actually made 10 times or 100 times growth. If you truly want to be a digital transformer, you need to be a destroyer first and foremost. Rethink your business model, rethink everything, and try to destroy your core business. For example, companies like ComfortDelGro in Singapore, the taxi service, could have easily become an Uber, a Lyft, a Grab, or a Gojek. And those companies are worth many, many times multiples of what a company like ComfortDelGro has. They had all the resources, they had even the willingness, but they weren't willing to digitally transform themselves. They just wanted to digitalize by launching an app. That made them an extra 10 or 20% cost saving. But then companies like a Grab or Gojek came along and completely digitally transformed an entire industry. And it's made those taxi companies somewhat irrelevant. So what is digital transformation? Well, it's actually made up of 5 key building blocks. First of all, strategy. Strategy is simple. How do you go from A to B? Engagement's the next piece, which I'll talk about, and that's taking everyone on the journey with you. Innovation is what's fundamentally driving you forward. It needs to be better and have a better outcome. Technology, well, you can't do digital without the digital transformation without the digital. You need tech. And of course, signposting your way along that journey is your data and analytics. Of course, underpinning that entire digital transformation is people. You've got to start off with the right leadership, putting in place a culture of psychological safety where you can fail fast and learn, and being digital literate. And of course, making sure you've got the right skills and competency across your entire organization. digital literacy, data literacy, a willingness to change, good digital communication skills, and a just general good understanding of digital technology. But unfortunately, 84% of digital transformation programs will fail. They absolutely will. So how do you make sure you're in the top 16% of programs that don't fail? Let me kind of break it down where digital transformation goes wrong. With the blanked out blue, white with a blue kind of outline there represents the things that are missing. First of all, if you lack strategy, but you have all the other elements of engagement, innovation, tech, and data, you have a fantastic outcome called digitization or digitalization. It's going to get you benefits incrementally, but it's not going to transform your organization. So your employees are engaged, you're driving forward with innovation, good technology in place, and everything is signposted, fantastic. Not a bad outcome. Where it starts to go radically wrong is where you're missing engagement. In any organization, what you have is three tiers. You've got the gung-ho leadership team, which is trying to drive you forward. You've got the new employees or the junior employees that are coming in and are super enthusiastic. But then you get stuck with the middle management, which is called the frozen middle. The frozen middle is exactly that. It stops any progress. Could be people who are actually just very comfortable where they are. Could be people who actually don't want to engage or just refuse to accept your digital transformation or any project really, and just simply either directly say no or indirectly detract and sabotage you behind the scenes. 70% of the failure rate happens here with a lack of engagement. There are ways around it. I mean, again, probably a conversation for another time, but you often got to find where those people are going to lose, make them the winner. And again, if you think about it, if you've actually funded your digital transformation by talking about headcount cuts and letting people go, I mean, those people are not going to want to support this project. So they'll sabotage you behind the scenes. The next is innovation. So if you're not fundamentally driving forward, you actually lead to a lot of incoherent action. So good strategy, good engagement, you've got technology in place, but again, you're not moving the needle forward. There's not any kind of serious benefit to it. You're just seemingly doing a lot of work for no particular reason. The fourth one is frustration. So this is where you lack technology. Now, you might be asking yourself, how can you do a digital transformation without the digital? Well, there could be a few reasons. What often happens is you go through a kind of a 3 quotation system, you find the cheapest vendor, but that cheap vendor probably doesn't have all the features you needed, certainly can't give you the right kind of guidance on your digital transformation journey, or fundamentally the technology is not up to scratch. It could also be the user interface feels like it came directly out of 1995. It could be a very slow solution, or it just could be something that's misspec'd or mismatched for your organization. Now, of course, if you don't have the technology right, or you don't have the technology at all, it's going to lead to a great deal of frustration. I can tell you, having worked in global banks and big MNCs before, things tend to get locked off. Social media gets locked down, you can't access your Gmail. There are certain solutions that are kind of on the IT bad books, which you're not allowed to access. I mean, just all of that is very frustrating, let alone trying to drive a deep digital transformation project where you're spending thousands or millions of dollars. Technology is just simply not good enough. And the last point there is stagnation. That's where you're missing your data and analytics. As I said, data should be your signpost to success. Tells you how fast you're going, tells you where you're going, gives you a sense of whether you're on the right track or not. And you go off track pretty quickly. Now that either is misdirection or stagnation. So I often say that if you can't visualize your data, you're not using it. And if it's sitting on someone's Excel spreadsheet and you've got to dust it off once a month, well, again, that's not an effective use of data either. The last couple of slides I want to talk about is digital disruption, because transformation usually follows a disruption. So if you look at this, there's actually 4 quadrants of industries, not companies, but industries. Now, if I start at the bottom left corner, these are durable industries that they have easily weathered any kind of digital change or technology updates. So think about alcoholic beverages. If you're a beer drinker, you know the formula for beer hasn't really changed in 1,000 years. And frankly, it doesn't matter how you distribute it. Yes, e-commerce is coming, the go-to-market will be different, the digital customer service will change, but fundamentally, alcoholic beverages are still the same industry. You can't digitally transform a beer. Same kind of thing with diversified chemicals, tires, and rubber, and other industries. They're largely going to ignore disruption from digital channels, but the way they do sales marketing operations, of course, will change. The next category is viable industries. Those viable industries, a good example is publishing. If you're old enough to remember, Amazon started out as a bookseller. Amazon desperately threatened the book selling industry. Big global players like Barnes and Nobles kind of actually needed to quickly pivot to become an online seller of books as well. But the publishers fundamentally suffered. The printing press started to die off. People actually needing printed books declined significantly. But what happened is that the form factor changed. It became about ebooks, it became about PDFs, it became about Kindle and iPad. So actually now, where we are today, there are more books and more kind of content being published than ever before. In fact, publishing has adopted and adapted very well to the digital world. They've embraced social media, they've embraced digital platforms, e-commerce, and they've embraced e-formats. So those businesses have become viable again. They've done very, very well. They've overcome the digital disruption that are facing them, and they're moving to a new era of prosperity. Let's look at the kind of troublesome quarters. So down the bottom right is vulnerable industries. Insurance companies, independent power brokers, so SP services and so on, distributors of healthcare, so pharmaceuticals, drug distributors and so on. They're extremely vulnerable. These businesses can be massively disrupted by direct-to-consumer models, by different ways of actually using digital and data, and it's going to be a real challenge for some of those organizations, but certainly not as much as the volatile quarter. Think about retail consumer banking, consumer technology, transportation services such as rail. So let me maybe kind of dive into a couple of those. We all know that fintechs are attacking banks and financial services companies. I mean, in fact, Singapore is the headquarters of fintechs in the region. I think it's grown tenfold over the past 5 years. So what does that mean? And, you see companies like Grab actually getting into bed with Singtel, launching GSX, the digital bank. We're seeing new fintechs replace traditional credit card or online payment solutions as the society goes cashless. Consumer technology, I mean, think about the form factor. I mean, I'm holding a phone here. So a phone is basically a rectangle sitting in your pocket. At some point, 10, 15 years ago, we decided moving away from a big brick down to that kind of glass form factor made sense. But you might not be aware of it, but organizations like Apple have actually dictated internally through secret memos, they're getting rid of that square form factor pretty soon. In fact, the target date is 2032. They want to get rid of mobile phones altogether. What are they going to replace it with? Augmented and virtual reality. And that's going to look like a set of eye drops, or it's going to look like a pair of glasses if they can't get the eye drops working, that is biomechanically plugged into you. So no longer are we going to be holding something in our hands to access the internet, apps, and content. We're going to have something directly into our eyeballs that's going to allow us to have an augmented reality experience, browse apps, use the internet, and engage with content. So consumer technology is disrupting itself, and it's disrupting its key competitors. So if you're a bank, if you're a consumer technology company, you're in big trouble. Digital disruption is going to hit you, and it means that you need to go through a significant digital transformation. Taking that a step further, again, this data is a couple of years old now, but it's very useful because what it gives you a sense of is what are the kind of key attributes that make companies disrupted. Those are two things. One, a very low barrier to entry into those sectors, maybe publishing. What happened with media, number one on that list. We've all got access to the ability to either shoot a video or actually write digital content. We can publish that via Facebook, via Medium and other platforms, or using even free tools, we can launch our own website. Of course, those businesses have a large legacy business model. Media has traditionally been supported by advertising. They've gone through a painful process of actually trying to jettison an advertising-driven model and move into a subscription or a paywall-driven model, or even a pay-per-use. So they're slowly getting there, but the reality is there's less take-up across reading free content with advertising support than there is paying $10 a month to access content. The rise of Coursera, Emeritus, other kind of MOOCs and online learning means that there's a very different way that people are engaging with educational content. It's become short and means that there's a premium around the certifications that are offered. So, could education ever be free and universal? Possibly. We're all facing disruption in some way, but if you're particularly in the media, telco, or banking space, you're probably a little bit more worried than most. And the last kind of slide on this content I want to take you through today is the most innovative companies. And this data is from BCG from 2021. I haven't done 2022 yet. If you contrast this to 2020 and 2019, there are a few new names here. They've put a particular emphasis on companies like Pfizer, companies like Abbott, Bosch, Merck, etc. in the pharma space. So all those companies that have quickly put together COVID-19 vaccines or quickly reorganized their business around how can they actually deal with the pandemics better have actually risen pretty high on this ranking. So let's look at the top 10. What you see, there's a very clear top 10 that's made up of tech companies. Yes, there are some healthcare there, but let's kind of, again, let's just put them aside for the moment. Let's look at the 20, LG, Facebook, Alibaba, Oracle, Dell, Cisco, Target, and HP. So we see a retail store kind of jumping in there. And again, if you look at the entire top 50, what you see is either tech companies, digital native from day one, or have become that, or companies that spend so much money on technology, they are almost like a digital native. So, when I look at this, I get a bit frustrated. And yes, we can say it's BCG, it's North America focused, but what I don't see is, I don't see Singapore companies at all. I don't see Asian companies well represented either. I can see Huawei, I can see Xiaomi, there's a few Chinese companies up there, but, and there's a couple of Japanese companies there as well, but you don't see a lot of Asian representation. And you certainly don't see any Singapore representation. And if you think about the industries that drive a market like Singapore, financial services, ports, even government, none of those are actually in those top 50. And frankly, I think they'd struggle to be in the top 500. And the final reflection I want to leave you on in this content is that we've actually seen 10 years of digital transformation happening over the pandemic period. It's been a tough 2020 and 2021. We know it's incredibly difficult to keep up with the pace of change, and hopefully Hyper Island has helped you with that, and it will continue to help you with that in the future. Digital transformations will mostly fail 84% of the time, often due to resistance, the lack of employee engagement, and the frozen middle of organizations. And finally, digital disruption is definitely here. It will impact you. Your job might get automated, or actually your industry might even go out of business. So unless you're keeping up to date with latest kind of upskilling, making sure you're actually driving and actually trying to destroy your own business through a digital transformation, you're probably either going to be out of a job or out of an industry.
Thank you for joining Curious Monday, your weekly dose of inspiration here at Hyper Island. If you like this content, please subscribe or give us a thumbs up, and we'll see you next time.